Hiya lovelies, this is your tutorial for your mushy sun catcher. Just to show you what you've got in your box quickly, you have 5 packs of beads, you've got 5 spacers, 5 charms which will all be different in every pack, you've got a piece of chain and a jewellery pin to attach your mushy. And then you've got a big collection of crimps, you've got a wooden ring, string, 5 pieces of thread and your stick, which has holes already drilled in it. Then you've got pliers, some glue for your moss, your individually little hand-painted mushy, and you'll have a bag of dried moss. So to get started, we're going to start with our beads. You're going to grab a piece of thread and you're going to put a crimp onto the end of there. Then grab a spacer and a charm, and then you're going to wrap the end around the charm and then back through the spacer and back through the crimp. Then grab the little tail end of the thread there and just pull the excess of the thread through, so it still dangles about and you've got the space for things to move around. Then lean it against your finger and squeeze the crimp nice and flat. So now it's just a case of feeding on your beads, and it's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing to bear in mind really is when you put your first bead on, when you get down to where the crimp is, just make sure that that little tail end of the thread is pushed into the bead, and then it just looks much neater. And it's just a case of putting the rest of the beads on however you want. Now this first thread is actually going to be the string of beads that goes into the middle, so you've got 5 threads and this will be the center one. So you can see my dots on my little board there. They measure 12, 10 and 8 centimeters. You can have them all the same length, but I choose to have them in a little V shape because I think it looks pretty. So I'll just check the length there, and we've got 12 centimeters. So next, all I need to do is secure those in place with a little crimp. So you just pop it on the end, and again you want to make sure you've got some flexibility between the beads so they kind of dangle around. You don't want them to be rigid, but you also want to make sure that there's not too much sort of thread showing when they do move around, and just squeeze that crimp into place. So again, because this is your center string of beads, we're going to attach the jewellery pin. So we're going to put on a crimp on the end of the thread, and then we'll put the jewellery pin. We're going to wrap it around and it's going to go back through the crimp. This is definitely fiddly, but once you've fed it back through, the easiest thing to do is to just grab your pliers and hold onto the crimp with the pliers, and then you can pull the excess thread through by just pulling that little tail, and then as soon as you've got it where you want it and there's no excess thread underneath, then just give it a squeeze. And that's your first string of beads done, and what you'll need to do is just grab some scissors later and cut that little bit off. So now you just need to rinse and repeat. So I'll just show you again how you start off the beads. So you're going to go crimp and then spacer, then charm, and then wrap the thread around the charm, back through the spacer, back through the crimp, and just pull that excess through. And you can do the beads however you like. I'm doing this one at 10 centimeters, so this will go either side of the red centerpiece, and I'll do a similar one for the other side. Just make sure when you've finished your string that you put a crimp onto secure the beads and stop them falling off. Make sure there's a bit of flex in the thread still and you haven't pulled it too tight, and then hold it into place. And then you can continue doing this until you've got all 5 strings and you're ready for the next stage. So now you're just going to grab your string, put the ends together so it's folded in half, grab the looped end and stick it through your wooden ring, grab the tails and pull it through like so. And then what you're going to do is you're going to tie a knot at the end of the string. So I'm sure there's a name for this, I can't remember what it's called, but basically just stuff that little bit through 3 times. And then push the knot towards the end of the string. Give it a little shove, and then you've got a chunky little knot, and then you can do the same on the other side. Just wrap it around 3 times and give it a shove and chunky knot. There you go, you got 2. And just place that above your stick for now. What you can do if it's not central is you can just loosen it up at any point and make sure that that rings in the middle. It should be fine, but it's just worth knowing. So next we're going to grab our chain and a string of beads that you're going to put at the edge of your stick. So if you pick up your chain and grab the very last link, and then you're going to push the thread up through that last link, and then from the bottom of your stick up through to the top. Then pull it tight. Then you're going to grab a crimp and drop that down. We've got another fiddly bit coming up, I'm afraid. So now if you hold on to your crimp, you're going to feed the thread back down through the crimp, and it's going to make a little loop. When you've got that little loop, you're going to get the knot on your string, and you're just going to stuff it through that little loop. And again, the easiest thing to do here is to just hold on to the crimp with the pliers, and it's easier to pull the thread through, and you want to make sure there's no slack on the underside of the log or around the string. And then when you're happy with it, just squeeze the crimp completely flat. Ignore the fact that I'm making this look way more awkward than it actually is. And the knot should be up against the crimp, but the string will slide through that gap a little bit, so don't worry if the knot's right up against it. And then you're going to grab the string that you want on the opposite side, poke the thread through, and then again you're going to go from the bottom of your stick up through to the top. Once you've pulled that tight, you're going to do the same on the other side. So pop a crimp through, loop it back through itself, and then this is a slightly better angle for you to see. And then you're just going to poke the knot through, and pull that tight. And when you're happy that it's all secure and there's no excess thread showing under the stick, then just squeeze the crimp tight. That's your 2 first beads and your hanging string all secure and in place. So next we are going to put the centerpiece in, and this just makes sure that your chain is sort of looped evenly. So if you kind of find the center point, and then you're going to push the jewelry pin up through one of the links, then again from the bottom up through to the top, and then you're going to secure that jewelry pin in place with another crimp. So now all that's left to do is to put the second and fourth ones in. You can find the center points of the chain and stick the thread up through there. I'm just going to have 2 loops on mine because I want to, and so I'll just scooch behind the chain there, and again I'm going to go from the bottom up through to the top, make sure there's no excess at the bottom, and then I just secure it in place with a crimp. And I'll do the same with the last string of beads. Then just grab some scissors and snip off those excess bits of thread. And then what you do, if you just grab your mushie, you'll notice that it's not as deep as that jewellery pin, so you've got a bit of excess there. So when you've established how much excess you have, just grab the scissors and snip that off of the top so that it sits snug against the stick. Now we're on to our final stage with the moss. So you've got a little pot of glue which has got a little like squeezy dispenser on the top. I like to smush mine on with a brush that I obviously stole from my kids' craft box. And you might find that some of the moss gets compacted during the drying process, so just make sure that it's not like blocked together and it's kind of floofy. And then really the goal of the moss, apart from looking very cute, is to cover up the beads and the crimps where it comes through. So I'm just going to start one end and go around that bit of string, just smush on a decent amount of glue. It will dry clear so you won't be able to see it. And then grab just a little bit of moss at a time and really sort of press it on. It won't flatten the moss will spring back up, but just make sure that you've really securely pressed it on because it's so sort of fibrous. It needs to get a decent amount of contact with the stick for it to stick. Then just work your way down. It might be easier to kind of go down the front and then go down the back, and just to make sure that you can't see those little crimps that are holding your beads in place. And obviously you will have your little jewellery pin sticking up through there, so make sure you work around that. And then we're just onto the mushie. So you've got a hole in there and it's slightly wider at the bottom, so it should go down over the crimp as well, if that's still visible through your moss. Stick as much glue as you can get onto the jewellery pin, because that's obviously going to go up into the hole and make it a bit more secure. And then just wang a load of glue, just splodge it on all around that hole on the bottom. And then you're going to just make sure everything's in line and not getting stuck where it doesn't belong. And then pop your mushie onto the jewellery pin. I'm going to just hold the bottom and then push it down into place. Make sure the jewellery pin bends quite easily, so you'll want to bend that back into place. And then just press and hold until it feels like it's got a bit of purchase. And you are